Hello, this is Lucas, and in this video I'm going to be going over functions in JavaScript. So a function is just a block of code that we can execute just by calling it anywhere in our code. Okay, so for example, let's create our function. So we'll just do function. Okay, now we need to give our function a name. So let's just do, I'm just going to do a show message. Okay, and now we just do brackets and then we do curly brackets. Now whenever we call this function, so show message, we are going to execute the piece of code that we insert in here. So we can just do something basic. We can do something like console.log, and we can just print out message. Okay. Now, if we just leave like this, nothing will happen because we need to call this function for it to execute this piece of code. So the way we do that is we just need to call the name of this method. So we'll do show message. And then we also do the brackets, and then we do a semicolon at the end. And this will just call this function right here. So if you go back to our code, or our page, refresh this, you can see we get a console.log of message. Because we are calling this message over here, and we're just executing the piece of code that we have inserted in here. Now, let's say that I create a variable inside of here. Let's just do x for now. Let's equal this to hello. Okay? And let's say I just want to print, I just want to console.log x. So this is going to work in the exact same way. We're just going to print out hello. Now, let's say if I want to use this variable that I've created in here outside of our function. So let's do something like, let's do the same thing. Let's do console.log. Let's do x as well. Now you can see we have declared x inside of our function. So if I go back to our page, refresh this, you can see we get an error. The reason why we get an error is because this variable here is only inside of this function. And whenever we declare a variable inside of a function, that means it's only available inside of that function. So we can't actually use this variable outside of our function. Okay? Now, let's say that we want to have a variable that's outside of the function. So let's just we'll do let x is equal to hello. Okay. Now let's remove this from here, for example. And let's just run this. Let's go back to our page, refresh this. You can see that we still get hello. Okay. So even if we declare it outside of the function, our function has access to x. Okay, and then you can see that we call this and we can print it out as well. Now the reason why we print it out twice is because we are printing out in here and we are printing it out in here. Okay, now if I have this as hello, and if I create a new variable called x and I equal this to goodbye, now what will happen? So let's go back to let's refresh this. You can see that firstly, we are printing out this x that is inside of our function. Now x is equal to goodbye. So whenever we print out x, we get goodbye. But because we are declaring a new variable inside of the function, this does not affect the variable that we create outside of the function. So you can see the first time we print it out, we get goodbye. And then the second time we print it out, we get hello. Okay, because this x was declared outside of the function, that's why that gets printed out as hello, and this variable was declared within the function, so that's why it was printed out as goodbye. Now we can also pass in a few variables as well, so let's just remove this for now. Okay. Now what we can do is we can pass in variables into this function here, so let's also remove this, we don't need this. Okay. So what we can do here is we can just put in x. So x is the value that we want to pass in as a parameter whenever we call this function here. So we can just do something like a string, or just make it easier. Let's create a new one. Let's do let x is equal to hello. Firstly, if we just leave like this, you can refresh this, you can see it's undefined. We don't know what x is, okay, because we are not passing in x. So to pass in x, all we have to do is we have to pass in x like this. So we are passing in this variable x, which is equal to hello. We are passing it in to this function show messages, or show message, and x will be stored as whatever value we pass in. So x in our function is going to be stored as hello. So now if you go back, refresh this, you can see the value that we get is hello. Now we can pass in any value in here as well. Like I can pass in a number, for example. We don't even need this. If I pass in a number, you can see we get the value 1. Or even I can just pass in a string like this. You can do hello. And this will have the same way. We're just passing in this value into here. Now we can have two values. We can do x and then we can do y. So then I can just print out x and y. Now if we just leave it this, we will have hello and then undefined, because we are only passing in one parameter. So whenever we pass in this parameter, the first parameter will be stored as x. And then what we need to do is we need to pass another parameter, and that second parameter, separated by a comma, will be stored as y. So now if you go back, refresh, you can see we get hello 2. So hello, the first parameter that we pass in will be stored as x, and then the second parameter that we pass in will be stored as y. And we can have multiple of these, it doesn't matter. We can have as many as you want. Now we can also have default parameters. So let's say we don't want to pass in the value y, but we want it to have a default parameter. So what you can do is we can pass in one parameter. So this will be stored as x because it's the first one. But then y we're not going to pass in. But what we can do is we can set that parameter to have a default value. So we can just do y is equal to, and then we can just do some like text. So now whenever we call this function, the first parameter that we pass in will be stored as y. And because we don't pass in a second parameter, that is by default going to be text. So go back, refresh this, you can see we get hello text. Now we can also return values from here. So for example, we can have, let's just create a new function. Let's do function, and we'll just call it add. And we are going to pass in two numbers, x and y. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to store a value of, let's say num, and this is going to equal to x plus y. Now, whenever we call this, okay, we wanted to return that number. So we'll just do return and then number. So what's going to happen here is we're going to call this function add. We're going to pass in two parameters, x and y. What we're going to do is we're going to add x and y together. That's going to store whatever value we get into num, and then we're going to return that value of num. So the way we can do this is, all we have to do is just call, well first we'll have to do let, and then we'll just pass in a number like number. And we're going to equal this to, and then we're going to call our function here. And then we need to pass in two numbers, so we'll just do 1 and 2. Now we can just run this, refresh this, and we need to do console.log. And now whenever we run this, you can see we get an answer of 3, because we are calling this function add. We are passing in 1 and 2, so that's going to be stored as x and y. We're going to add those two numbers together, which is 3. We're going to store that value 3 into num, and then we are going to return that value. So we are going to return 3. Now whenever we return a value, we need to set the value that we return to another value. So we create a new variable called number. So now number is going to be equal to whatever value was returned from this function here by passing in these two parameters. Okay, so number is going to be stored as 3 because we will return 3, and then we are just going to print out that value here. So that is about it for functions in JavaScript. I hope this video was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.